Have you ever found yourself wide awake between 3 and 5 in the morning? No alarm, no noise, just your eyes popping open. You turn over, check the clock, sigh, and wonder, why this hour? Could it be random or could it be divine? See, when the world is silent, when your phone isn't buzzing, when no one is demanding your time, that's when heaven might just be trying to get your attention. Could it be that God is waking you up on purpose because he's got something to say? Let's talk about why God might be interrupting your sleep between 3 and 5 in the morning. Do you ever wonder why it's always around the same time? You're not tossing and turning at 11 p.m. You're not waking up at sunrise. No, it's that stretch of time nobody wants to be awake, between 3 and 5 in the morning. You roll over, your room is quiet, the lights are off, the world is asleep, but you're not. And you ask yourself, why now? Some people dismiss it as poor sleep habits, stress, or a late night snack catching up with them. But what if it's something more? What if it's not a disruption at all, but a divine appointment? God is a God of intentionality. Nothing about him is random. He doesn't just do, he ordains. He doesn't just act, he assigns. So when you find yourself waking up in the early morning hours without reason, maybe it's not insomnia, maybe it's invitation. Throughout Scripture, God often met his people in moments of stillness. Moses heard God's voice in the silence of the wilderness. Samuel heard his call in the quiet of the night. Jesus himself rose early, very early, to spend time with his Father before the sun came up. Because when everything else is quiet, your soul can finally hear. That time between 3 and 5 a.m., when there are no meetings, no calls, no texts, no noise, is a spiritual sanctuary. It's a moment where heaven leans in and says, now that I have your attention, let's talk. Most of us live too loud to hear God. We fill our lives with sound, podcasts, playlists, phone calls, TikToks, texts, and then we say, God, why don't I feel close to you? Well, maybe he's been trying. Maybe he's been tapping you on the shoulder every morning before dawn saying, I miss you, but you keep pulling the blanket over your head. You keep calling it just a bad night's sleep. What if it's not your body that's tired? It's your spirit that's restless. God doesn't waste time. So if he's waking you up, it's not just so you can scroll for 30 minutes and complain about being tired the next day. It's not a fluke, it's a summons. He's inviting you into a meeting with no distractions, no background noise, and no interruptions. That kind of silence isn't empty, it's sacred. That's where God often does his deepest work. Now, it's important to recognize this. You're not always being awakened for a reason that makes sense in the moment. Sometimes God doesn't start with answers, he starts with presence. He just wants you to come to sit, to be still. And maybe you won't hear a booming voice. Maybe there won't be lightning or a vision. But you'll notice something: your mind calms down, your anxiety lifts, your thoughts begin to focus. In that stillness, your soul realigns with its source. And that by itself is powerful. Think of it like this. If the president of a nation called you at 3 a.m. and said, I need to talk, you'd be wide awake in a heartbeat. You'd sit up, take notes, clear your throat, maybe even stand. You wouldn't say, can we do this later? Because the weight of who is calling demands your attention. But when the King of Kings is nudging your spirit at 3:37 a.m., we call it a sleep problem. No, it's a divine priority. God doesn't operate on your schedule. He operates on eternity's schedule. And when that eternal schedule intersects with your earthly clock, it may not be convenient, but it is always critical. Sometimes the very thing you've been praying for, direction, healing, clarity, is waiting on the other side of your obedience. You've asked God to speak, but when he calls in the early morning, you hang up. Not now, Lord. I'm tired. But he's saying, I have what you've been asking for, if you'll just meet me. Now, don't get it twisted. This isn't about legalism. This isn't about setting your alarm for 3 a.m. and trying to manufacture an encounter. This is about responding when God initiates. This is about learning to discern the difference between a restless body and a restless spirit. When your soul is stirred from sleep and you feel that holy nudge to rise, not out of worry, but out of wonder. That's not just biology, that's invitation. That's heaven knocking on your heart. And here's the beautiful thing, when you answer that knock, God doesn't waste the moment. Sometimes he'll speak through scripture, sometimes through a whisper in prayer. Sometimes he won't say a word, but you'll feel peace that carries you through your day. You'll walk different. You'll think clearer. You'll move with assurance. Why? Because you kept a divine appointment when it would have been easier to hit snooze. So the next time your eyes pop open and the clock reads 4:11 a.m., before you roll over and groan, ask this simple question: Lord, are you calling me? Because if he is, there's purpose in that moment. There's something he wants to do in you before he does something through you. It's not a disruption. This is a divine appointment. And heaven never shows up late. Have you ever noticed how much noise surrounds you during the day? From the minute you wake up, it's notifications, conversations, responsibilities, distractions. Life doesn't ask for permission before it piles on your mind. Even when you try to find a quiet moment, it seems like something or someone finds a way to interrupt it. But there's something about those early morning hours between 3 and 5 a.m. when the world hasn't fully awakened. The traffic outside hasn't started. The kids are still asleep. Your phone isn't pinging. That stillness, that's where your spirit breathes. And it's in that breath, in that sacred quiet, where God often chooses to speak. You see, spiritual sensitivity is often drowned out by the noise of the day. We say we want to hear from God, but we rarely give him space. We want direction, peace, guidance, healing, but we give him 5 distracted minutes. Then we're off to the next thing. But God doesn't compete with chaos. He doesn't shout over your schedule. He waits for stillness. That's why those early hours carry such weight. Your mind is clearer. Your spirit isn't battling everything yet. Your defenses are down. And when your defenses are down, your discernment can rise. When God wakes you up at 3:21 a.m., it may not be because he wants to fix something. It may be because he wants to feel something. He's looking for an open heart, not a perfect schedule. That time before sunrise isn't just quiet for the sake of peace. It's quiet for the sake of connection. When your environment slows down, your spirit tunes in. You're more likely to notice his presence. You're more likely to recognize his whispers, because he does whisper. Remember Elijah? He didn't hear God in the wind or the earthquake or the fire. He heard him in the still, small voice. And if you're always surrounded by earthquakes of responsibility and fires of busyness, how can you hear the stillness of God's voice? You can't hear a whisper in a storm, but you can hear one in a quiet room at 4 a.m. Now, this isn't about being super spiritual. This isn't about becoming some kind of monk or mystic. This is about understanding the rhythm of how God often speaks. He's relational. He waits for connection. And sometimes that connection requires pulling you away from the noise. That's why he wakes you up, not to punish you, not to inconvenience you, but to invite you. He wants to give you something before the world takes everything. He wants to realign your spirit before your phone rewires your brain. He wants to settle your heart before the day unsettles your emotions. There are things God wants to say to you that can't be said when your attention is divided. There are truths he wants to deposit into you that require full access, not partial presence. And the early morning, that's often the only time he gets all of you. Unfiltered, unedited, undistracted. That's the version of you God speaks to most clearly. Not the one performing, but the one who's just present. And here's what happens when you respond to that stillness. Over time, your spiritual senses sharpen. You start to recognize his voice quicker. You begin to feel his nudges more clearly. Discernment becomes second nature. You don't have to pray for clarity as often because you've already been receiving it. When others are panicking, you've already received peace. When others are confused, you've already received direction. Why? Because you've been in the secret place. You've been listening before the world started talking. Spiritual sensitivity isn't about being hyper emotional. It's not about chasing feelings or mystical moments. It's about creating space for God to have full access to your heart. And when you consistently give him that access, your sensitivity grows. That means you'll start to see his fingerprints in your day. You'll catch when he's redirecting you. You'll recognize when a decision isn't right, not because of logic, but because of the Spirit's leading. That kind of sensitivity doesn't just come from being busy with God. It comes from being still with God. Some of the most powerful revelations come not from shouting prayers, but from silent listening, from sitting in that quiet moment, saying, God, I'm here. What do you want to say? And sometimes he speaks clearly. Other times he doesn't say anything at all, but you leave the moment changed anyway, because being in his presence does something to you that words alone can't. So don't rush past that 4:15 a.m. awakening. Don't treat it like an inconvenience. Don't assume your body just failed you again. Your spirit may be more awake than your mind realizes. God might be calling you to a level of awareness, of sensitivity, that can only be formed in the quiet. And if you'll respond, if you'll listen, you'll find yourself walking through life not just awake physically, but fully alive spiritually. Because in the stillness, God doesn't just speak. He aligns, he reveals, he transforms. And sometimes all he's waiting for is for you to be still enough to listen. You ever wake up in the middle of the night with someone on your mind and you don't know why? No dream, no text, no phone call, just their name rising in your spirit like a whisper you didn't ask for. It could be a family member, a friend, a coworker, sometimes even someone you haven't talked to in years. And you sit there staring at the ceiling, wondering why that person's name won't let go. That's not coincidence. That's not your imagination. That may very well be a heavenly assignment. Sometimes when God wakes you up between 3 and 5 a.m., it's not about you at all. It's about someone else. See, we like to think that when God calls us, it's always for our benefit, for our healing, our blessing, our clarity. But what if the call is for someone else's breakthrough? What if your obedience in the quiet becomes someone else's rescue in the chaos? God is always working behind the scenes, and one of the ways he moves in the spiritual realm is through intercession. That means standing in the gap for someone who may not be strong enough, or wise enough, or aware enough to stand for themselves. Sometimes people are too burdened to pray. Sometimes they're too broken to see clearly. And that's when God taps someone else, a willing vessel, a yielded heart, to carry that burden in prayer. And in the silence of those early morning hours, when your mind is clear and the distractions are gone, that's when he may call you to stand. It's easy to ignore those moments. We want to roll over, shake off the thought, tell ourselves it's random. But if you've ever obeyed, if you've ever stopped and prayed right then and there, you know something shifts. You can feel it. You may not always know what you're praying for, but you'll know who you're praying about. And the Spirit takes it from there. Because intercession doesn't always need full information. It just needs full surrender. The truth is, while we're sleeping, there are battles happening in people's lives that we can't see. There are moments when a child is teetering on the edge. A marriage is hanging by a thread. A person is contemplating decisions that could alter everything. And in those critical hours, God often wakes someone up to pray. Not later, not tomorrow, but now. Because the urgency of the moment requires a spiritual response. Heaven is looking for someone who won't ignore the call. Someone who will pray in faith, even if they never get credit, even if they never see the outcome. And the amazing thing is, your prayer in that moment might be the difference. You may be the one who stands between the attack and the breakthrough. You may be the one who stops what the enemy had planned. That's not small. That's not background work. That's frontline spiritual warfare. And God trusts you enough to wake you up for it. We often say we want to be used by God, but when he nudges us at 3:47 a.m., we assume it's a bad dream. Yet those are the moments that matter. That's when you step into a role that's bigger than yourself. You become a part of someone else's story of deliverance. You become the unnamed intercessor who prayed when no one else knew they needed prayer. So the next time you wake up and someone's name won't leave your heart, don't dismiss it. Don't delay. Don't underestimate it. That's not just a thought. That might be a mission. And when you accept it, when you rise to pray in that quiet space, you're not just losing sleep, you're gaining purpose. Because in the stillness of the early morning, God may be asking you to be the answer to someone else's cry. Let me know if you'd like the final. Sometimes you're not being awakened in the middle of the night because something is wrong, but because something is coming. And God in his wisdom won't let you step into a new season without being prepared. You might think your sleep is being interrupted, but it's really your spirit being instructed. God isn't trying to rob you of rest. He's preparing you for responsibility. He's shaping you before revealing what he's about to release into your life. The early morning hours are often a spiritual training ground. God trains his warriors in the quiet, in the dark, when no one's watching. Before David ever held a crown, he was alone in the fields with sheep. Before Moses led a nation, he was in the desert with nothing but silence. Before Jesus called disciples and performed miracles, he rose early to pray in deserted places. See, before public purpose comes private preparation, and that preparation often starts when the world is asleep and your heart is finally awake. When God wakes you up between 3 and 5 a.m., he might be stretching your capacity. He might be building your endurance. He may be whispering vision to you, vision that requires your full attention. There are things he can't show you in the middle of your busyness. There are callings he can't speak into when you're distracted. So he carves out time when it's just you and him. No audience, no pressure, no noise. And in that stillness, he begins to work. You might not see the fruit right away. You might spend a few mornings praying, journaling, listening, and still feel like nothing is changing. But understand, seeds are always planted in hidden places. Growth begins underground where no one can see it. God doesn't waste time. If he's calling you consistently in those hours, it means something is being built in you that you're going to need. It could be faith for the next step, wisdom for a new opportunity, strength for a battle you haven't even faced yet. It's in those quiet moments that your identity gets rooted. You start seeing yourself the way he sees you, not as someone overlooked, but as someone chosen, not as someone broken, but someone called. And when that identity settles in your spirit, you begin to walk into new seasons, not with fear, but with clarity and confidence. Don't despise those early wake-ups. Don't rush past them or pray for them to stop. Lean into them. Sit with them. Ask God what he's forming in you, because one day the door is going to open. One day the season is going to shift. And when it does, you won't be caught off guard. You'll be ready. You won't be scrambling. You'll be steady. Because the same God who woke you up in the night was preparing you for what was waiting in the light.